What's a political hill you're willing to die on? I don't know how much congressmen get paid in the US, but in my country, I guess an equivalent of a congressman would be paid above the average, but not a Sheehan either. And honestly, be careful about what you wish for. You get easier to corrupt people, and many bright people have plenty more lucrative places to work in. Compared to the state budget, the very top government salaries is still fucking nothing, yet is a strong disincentive for corruption. 100% this, publicly funded elections, no individual donations, no corporate donations, no PACs. All elected officials must divest their stocks and other speculative assets and place all their money in a blind trust of companies that manufacture goods in the USA. Corruption and the appearance of corruption should be treated on par with crimes like murder, rape, and assault. Agreed. I firmly believe that political corruption should result in the death penalty. Let me clarify, I do not mean the mayor that bought fancy curtains for his office. I mean the politicians that insider trade during a crisis while lying to their constituents, the ones that lied to start wars, etc. Well, yes, that's why most moderates wouldn't exactly go for execution but rather prison. Still though, politicians already use everything they can to get rid of others. I don't even wanna image the underground shit, so yeah, wouldn't be that much different. But you get rid of most corruption cases, let's face it, some will always do it secretly. I'm not sure I'd ask for the death penalty, but some penalty would be nice. You hear every day of scandals that go nowhere. At the very least, these people should be losing their positions. I don't care if you forgot to include something on your disclosure forms. You get fired from a regular job for forgetting way less sleazy stuff than that. This sounds good and all, but it is demonstrably false. Politicians don't have passed laws limiting themselves. Citizens United was notable in part because it overturned laws passed by Congress specifically to limit the amount of money that could be put into political efforts. You're not missing much. The controversial sort contains a mix of downvoted left-wing opinions, downvoted right-wing opinions, and downvoted stupidity. It's basically the fringes of either side that even the more moderates don't agree with, along with straight-up edgy sheet posting, and completely factually incorrect takes on issues that should never have become politicized in the first place. Depends. Do you want to read hot takes about economics opinions disguised as politics opinions, healthcare opinions disguised as politics opinions, or cheap shots at US political figures who aren't in office anymore? Then you will be happier in 5 minutes. Otherwise, I'd steer clear. 'Tis a silly place. The two-party system is the natural result of politicians and voters making optimal strategic decisions in a system with first-past-the-post voting. Proportional representation for parliamentary bodies, like the Senate and the House of Representation, and ranked choice voting is known to fix the problem, both in theory and in practice. You get other problems, like having to form a coalition government in order to reach a majority or giving a voice to fairly extreme parties such as UKIP. But countries with these voting systems do have more than two viable parties. On the whole, I think these problems are fairly minor compared to the profound theoretical problems with first-past-the-post voting. There is a movement in the US to adopt ranked choice voting, usually on a state or local level. Adopting it on a nation level would require a constitutional amendment, so I don't see that happening anytime soon. I'd really like ranked voting. There may be even better options. I can't remember all the other methods that have been suggested, but it would definitely be an improvement over what we have. People could vote for the third party they actually like without fear of wasting their vote, and then they could also vote for the lesser of the traditional villains as their second or third choice. Australia has ranked choice voting, and ranked politicians to go with it. The trouble with ranked choice is that politics geeks fucking love it, but minimum effort voters can't be bothered with the details. So you end up with increasing desperate savings measures, and in the end 80% of voters just vote some party and let the rest fall where they may. Look up Donkey Vote if you want a scary experience. I think you would be better to start with compulsory voting, not least because then we didn't expect so many voters becomes inexcusable, and a proportional system, ideally with multi-memory electorates. That's where we get into increasingly desperate savings measures, and for a country like the USA you have to remember that they are starting with zero knowledge and zero experience. That's why I'm suggesting simple, easy to understand fixes. Everyone has to vote is close enough to every adult citizen should have at least the theoretical possibility of being able to vote that most people can probably understand why it's a good idea. Partisan control of the electoral process notwithstanding, think of it as a set of goals starting from the easiest and working up to the more advanced ones. Everyone eligible has to vote is easy. More people should be eligible is only a little bit harder. Herr Clark with random ballot order and optional exhaustion is very hard. National standard for ballots is a pile of constitutional amendments, and independent election officials is next to impossible. First you amend the constitutions to even allow that. Hi, I agree with you that our political system is badly broken, and in large part because the voting system is so terrible. I share your goal of a system that better represents us and reduces the incentives for negative campaigning. After studying voting systems for a while, though, I came to learn that ranked choice voting doesn't deliver the benefits I was hoping for. It doesn't eliminate spoilers, as is often claimed. It has some smaller benefits, but also some major drawbacks, both practical and technical. One of the most serious is that RCV increases the fraction of ballots that are spoiled and discarded, and significantly more so in low-income neighborhoods, measured to be about 5 to 10% more in real elections. Can you imagine penalizing the vote count in all the poorer areas by 5%? It would have a massive effect. Sadly, I have to say that RCV is no better than our current system, and probably worse. Fortunately, there exists a method that is far easier to explain and to understand, far simpler to implement and to audit, and actually does solve most of the problems you and I want to solve. It's called approval voting, and it's so simple. We don't even need to print new ballots. Read about it here. https://electionshins.org/library/approval voting versus serve/. I'm a Christian. I also believe this. Not all people of even the same religion believe in the same stuff. Many Christians, for example, don't interpret the Bible in the same way. So why should we allow some of those Christians to enforce laws, and the same Christians that are good with the church controlling the government would lose it if an ally we trust was on the US dollar? It's hypocritical. The money phenomena described by science don't give a damn about politics. Corona doesn't care about your votes. But politics sure wants to get its grubby hands all over science. Well, the money behind politics wants to get its grubby hands all over the science, and politics is the rusty, grubby tool by which it does so. It's not even greed as much as the need to survive. Very few people are going to fund science for science. It's why funding to repeat experiments is so low while being so important. Even universities want the prestige that comes with science, which leads to more money for them. Companies want a return on their investment, and scientists need to eat too. Scientist here, while I get what you are saying, I will point out doing science is always political on some level because people are the ones doing science, and everyone has their subjective opinions on how to best do things. However, my bet is you mean something like the scientific consensus shouldn't be political. I'll agree there for sure. I know too many people who claim they like science, but in actuality just like trivia facts because they'll just ignore whatever they don't agree with personally, as if the universe gives a damn what you believe. The U.S. government has no power or right to abolish private ephemeral conversations via backdooring or prohibiting encryption no matter what its rationale. So many of my politics have changed in the past several decades, but I will die on this hill. Secure encryption, to the extent that this is possible technologically, is an individual right, and governments which infringe it ought to be defied and subverted, even if it causes social problems, even if it supposedly makes us less safe. I support an amendment to the U.S. Constitution guaranteeing a well-defined right to privacy. One more. Civil asset forfeiture, as it currently is superstitious legal voodoo. It should not be possible to seize assets before a guilty conviction, and this business of naming property as a defendant is an ugly absurdity which constitutes nothing short of tyranny. Immoral, sure, but remember that legal and illegal are constructs of society and not a reference to any fundamental truth. It's an important distinction to keep in mind, because if you object to it on the grounds that it's illegal, you may be informed that you're objectively wrong, but if you object to it on the grounds that it's immoral, you'll be able to get a proper debate. Ask yourself why you'd go into politics. It seems to me the options are: A. Because you want to serve the people and improve things. B. Because you want to fight change and keep things exactly as they are because you believe them to be right. C. Because you want to make money. It seems to me that while A and B are both honorable, only A serves an ever-changing social landscape, and yet all we ever end up with is C. I was super excited to rank my ballot for the first time in NYC this year. Unfortunately, a minor bureaucratic mistake resulted in a miscount of the initial and unofficial tally. The result of that mistake: we didn't have first-round results until a few days later than expected. A lot of people are up in arms blaming ranked choice now, and I'm worried this inconsequential snafu may have fucked up any potential for it being implemented statewide here, as well as it being used as an argument against ranked choice elsewhere. Brexit is the most incomprehensible stupid decision since the First World War. That was the most comprehensively stupid decision of all time. There isn't any extra money for the NHS, which suddenly is short-staffed because we rely on foreign-born staff. The red tape hadn't magically disappeared. In fact, it is far worse. We aren't free. In fact, the government is passing legislation that takes away fundamental rights such as peaceful protest. The supermarkets are running out of food. That wasn't Project Fear, and the Northern Ireland issue wasn't fixed in the course of an afternoon. You are allowed to oppose 1 or 2 or 50 policies and philosophies of your selected political candidate and party. Likewise, you are allowed to subscribe to 1 or 2 or 50 policies and philosophies of the opposing political candidate and party. You are not two-faced, you are not a traitor, you are not a Nazi or wokey, you are open-minded. Yeah, that's a big one. And even better if our politicians were to adopt this practice. I think it was 20 or 30 years since a bill had been passed that had a majority of both parties voting for it. Since then everything has been passed by one majority. Politicians used to go back and forth, and the difference between the two parties, and variance within, were larger. The American political duopoly is ruining our country, and making it an us first system space, where you are shown to hate your political opponents. I agree not everyone needs to go to college, but I disagree in prices. Prices won't drop until states start funding like they did prior to the late 90s and administrations cut the fat from their ranks, neither of which I see happening sooner. I want to say student loans shouldn't be federally backed, but that's a touchy subject. Actually, in one of my political science classes, it was argued that having fewer people vote, voluntarily not due to being unable to, is a sign of happiness from the populace, as they do not feel a pressing need to vote. If they see little differences in their lives due to an election, the people tend to not vote, and it's usually due to being content. I think a lot of people realize it. I mean, middle schoolers can see it. However, since every person has different beliefs, they see the divide, but think that the other side should see things their way, meaning that the divide will never stop because there aren't enough people open to talking rational about a specific issue, and then being able to have a beer with the person they disagree with. It's always all or nothing with us. Just treat everyone kindly and the exact same. Sounds like a good policy to me. Joking aside, I think it's clear after a few thousand years that golden rule is not effective as a casual advice. People are still racist and homophobic, or worse yet, in denial that racism and homophobia exist. In a peaceful society, law becomes the best protection that minorities can rely on for equal rights. Dental and eye care should be part of medical insurance, and not treated as separate. Have an ENT problem that is affecting your gums and teeth, too? Sorry, bud, not my specialization. Go see a lesser practitioner whose separation of discipline is rooted, pun intended, to a time when your dentist and barber were the same guy. I typed up a whole response to an now-deleted question about whether vaccinations fall under the umbrella of bodily autonomy. I don't want to throw away my comment like that user did, so I'm posting my response under your comment. Question: not trying to be a troll, but does bodily autonomy include the right to abstain from vaccines? I'm vaccinated, FYI. My answer: I suppose one could argue that that is a right. However, I would argue that if a person wants to participate in certain aspects of society, then vaccination is a condition of that participation. For example, you don't have to drive a car, but if you do, you'll need to satisfy certain conditions: register the vehicle, pay for insurance, wear a seat belt, don't drive if drinking. That one could be called a bodily autonomy issue. Skeptical, and abide by all the other laws of the road, but you do have the right not to drive. People who denounce all politicians as equally evil and corrupt are either uneducated on the issues or looking for an excuse to lazily remain uneducated. It's one thing to be a cautious skeptic or to see the inherent corruption of a system, but it's another thing entirely to eschew nuance in order to be a lazy spectator. No one political party or politician is going to be perfect, ever. You may see any and all standing parties as unfavorable. You may be thoroughly disenchanted with the system, but as long as you refuse to participate in that system, or, worse yet, refuse to admit any relative strengths, weaknesses among current options, you are contributing to the perpetuation of the very systems you dislike. Progress rarely, if ever, comes quickly and dramatically. Progress is a boulder we slowly push up a mountain, through perseverance even in the face of setbacks and momentary weakness. Progress also does not move in a straight line. It's happening or can happen even if you don't recognize it on a daily basis. That doesn't mean you walk away from the boulder that your friends, family, and neighbors are still trying to push. Decrying every public figure as equally terrible and invariably irredeemable isn't an opinion that comes from a discerning eye or a deep pool of information. It's a way of burying your head in the sand, where your complaints will only be heard and validated by others with their heads buried. Political salary should be based on delivery of election promises and overall social improvement of the country. If you use your time in office to line your pockets and fuck the little guy, you get no pension and minimum wage. If you use your time in office to create or improve welfare for all across the board and deliver on promises to the electorate, then you get nice bonuses and a pension. If you use your time in office to create laws that give rich people more and poor and vulnerable people less, then you get kicked out of office. The current college tuition system is the most progressive taxation system in the world. The poor pay negative tuition, lower middle class pay no tuition, and it scales up from there. At my alma mater, students from families with income under $75,000 paid no tuition. This is far more progressive than every tax system on the planet. Student loan forgiveness without means testing is effectively a handout to the rich. I am prepared to be downvoted,